Also joining me in the studio now to discuss this ongoing situation is international security and risk consultant Olivier Guita. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
We were hearing from a fellow expert in the area, Ayo Johnson there. His view is that this is Al-Qaeda and IS working hand in hand. Is that your view?
No, not at all. IS is not at all present in Mali. Al-Qaeda has been present in Mali for a long while, especially Al-Qaeda and Islamic Maghreb. There are very different groups in Mali, about 5 that you've never heard of, jihadist groups that could be behind this. There was a group springing up in the past few months in the center of the country that was much more active. Islamic State has no presence whatsoever in Mali. I wouldn't see AQ working with IS hand in hand in that kind of operation. You have to remember that Mali has been a hotbed of jihadism since 2013. The French have expressed much concern to everybody's silence. So for them, they know that Mali is one of the most problematic countries when it comes to jihad, along with Libya and Iraq and Syria, but it hasn't got much press. So it's not that this is happening in a vacuum. This is a country that has been feeling the brunt of jihad for the past few years. So any group at this point could be behind it because of the sheer number of jihadists that are competing with one another. But IS is not in the picture as of now. What we can say is that Bamako has not been really targeted, the capital, for a long while. So that's a game changer. The fact that they attacked Mali through wanting to attack the French, I think it's an overstretch, because what I would think they would look at is the fact that they don't get enough media exposure, and that's what you have to remember. Those terror groups are after power, but also media exposure. If it weren't for this hostage crisis, the Western world wouldn't speak about Mali. So that's one of the things that you're looking at, what Al-Shabaab has done in Kenya with the Westgate, that got them their name recognition. That's exactly the same kind of attack, attacking soft targets, foreigners, and get media exposure. So that could be any group. So that could be Ansar Dine, that could be Al-Qaeda and Islamic Maghreb, that could be any local group as well. And it's not a very sophisticated attack. I mean, if you have 10 people coming in with guns and grenades into a hotel, that's not something that is very difficult to do, especially in that area of the world.
As you say, it's not difficult to do, but what is the level of intelligence there? You said that France has been worried for some time about the level of Islamist extremism in Mali. Will they be involved with security operations there, with intelligence, trying to keep French residents or international residents in the capital, in the country, safe?
Look, a couple of things. There's been warnings from different diplomats and entities in France about traveling to Mali. I mean, there's travel warnings. The country is far from being safe, and they know that being there. I think what changes the dynamics is that there are actually French troops there, but there are also troops around, neighboring countries are around. The French have an operation that is called Barkhane, army operation that has about 4,000 soldiers in the region trying to counter terrorism. So that's one.
Sorry, Olivier, I didn't mean to stop you there abruptly. We just want to show some video of the scene outside the hotel, just in from somebody who's on the scene. Let's just take a look and listen. pictures are just into us from a resident of Bamako, a viewer. I think we saw just before the shot change either a soldier or some kind of just behind that truck there. Not clear exactly where this is taken in relation to the hotel. We've also just got in some pictures of hostages being released. Let's have a look at those. There you are. Unclear. Well, it looks like the person dressed in black, possibly the person dressed in white, and the third person behind them, also with white trousers on, look like the hostages that may have been released there. You can see them more clearly there. And there are reports that these hostages, if not these hostages, then certainly some hostages were released when they were asked if they could cite from the Quran, and they did so. We're also hearing reports that two female hostages have been released. So it's unclear just how many people have been freed at the moment. Mali security forces, I'm just reading on a news agency, have evacuated around a dozen hostages from the hotel now. Still a huge number remain. 170 people taken hostage this morning. So Mali security forces reporting around a dozen or so of those have been freed. Well, joining me on the phone now is Jeff Warren, who's a risk analyst who was in Mali just in September conducting a security review there. Very good to talk to you, Jeff. What was your view of security in the capital, Bamako?
Yeah, good morning. Bamako it's got an air of relaxation about it, and considering what's happening in the rest of the country, especially in the north with Ansardine and Al Qaeda, it was very relaxed.
Tell us, describe what it was like. I mean, we've heard that this hotel, as others have been, which have been at the target of terror attacks in the past, they are so-called soft targets because the security is limited. There may be one guard at the gate. I don't know if you went to this hotel at all. Just paint a picture of what you actually saw in the capital.
Yeah, very much. I went to the hotel, and you're exactly right. There was sort of one guard, there was one barrier. Security was very relaxed, and I think when I was there, we had the attack on Mopti, or Sevare near Mopti, which proved that these Islamic groups were willing to go into areas that they'd not necessarily operated in before and take Western hostages, and more worryingly, that they were prepared to give their... I don't necessarily subscribe to the fact that this is an IS attack. All the time I was there, we heard no mention of IS or no affiliation with any Islamic group with IS. But the two major groups out there, Ansardine and Al Qaeda, were clearly, although in opposition, would work together when suited them.
And what was your assessment, your risk assessment, when you concluded it?
For Bamako, it was certainly for Westerners to be more aware and not to set patterns. You know, one of the things that the Westerners would do out there, they would frequent the same bars, restaurants, hotels, and therefore make themselves an easy target. So one of our big things was to change their patterns of life.
I just want to update our viewers on the situation. France 24 are reporting that 3 people have been killed and 15 hostages released, we understand. In terms, Jeff, of the security operation now, I don't know how much involvement you had and what you did in terms of talking to security people on the ground, but what do you think will happen in terms of people coming together, French troops, Malian troops, UN troops coming together to try and resolve this? Jeff, do we still have you? Afraid we've lost Jeff there, but he was updating us on his view of security on the ground there, and indeed he had been to this same hotel to conduct a security review as well while he was there in September, the Radisson Blue Hotel, and confirmed that it was, like many hotels, a soft target, very little in the way of security. And let's rejoin our guest here in the studio, who's an expert in these matters as well. Olivier, you just had that news, you saw it on France 24, that several of the hostages have been killed.
Right. It looks like 2 Malian and 1 French citizens were killed so far, but this is a developing story, and I think that unfortunately that shows the resolve of terrorists. I think what's meaningful, and this compares to the Al-Shabaab attack on Westgate, is the fact that they had supposedly cleared out the Muslims hostages from the siege, and that's something that is very meaningful that we tend to see in those attacks. But what's important is that we will know very quickly if they're willing to go on with that hostage taking, like in the case of Mumbai or like in the case of Westgate, and to keep the media looking at it for a day or two, or if they're going to do like at the Bataclan, unfortunately, where they had no intention of negotiating and they just wanted to kill people. We should know that and their intention very quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as seems to be the case all too frequently in these terror attacks, all they want to do is kill people. They don't actually have any other goal other than gaining the world's attention to what they're doing, the terror they're causing.
Right. And in this case, as I said, they want to make Mali central to what's happening in Africa. And I think that a couple of assessments and looking at the number of terror groups, Mali was bound to have this kind of attack on Westerners.
That's a grim assessment of the situation. And given that, do you think that there possibly was enough forethought to protecting them?
Unfortunately, never enough. But as I said, when it comes to the international community, there was not really an urgency about Mali. It was just the French jumping up and down and telling their allies that Mali was going to be a problem. And when it was time to intervene in 13, nobody from the European Union or the Americans came on board with the French to save Mali from being taken over by Al-Qaeda.
The Reuters news agency are just reporting, Olivier, that the Malian security forces have stormed the hotel, so obviously not wanting to wait for this situation to play out as you thought possibly might be the case. They want to try and bring it to some kind of resolution, and the danger is, it's a danger both ways, isn't it? They storm it and risk the lives of those inside. They wait and risk the lives of those inside as well.
Right, but I assume when they had the indication that they had already killed 3 hostages, that was the sign for them to know that they didn't want to negotiate and they were bound on trying to kill everyone. So I assume that might have been one of the reasons for them to intervene so quickly then.
Let's bring in Dominic Waghorn, our diplomatic editor. Dominic, we haven't had a response from the UK government yet, but the American embassy in Bamako immediately tweeted that this operation was ongoing and warned all US residents there to try and take cover and be safe. And now President Obama has also been briefed on this.
Yes, the US embassy ordered all the American people in Bamako in Mali to stay in place, a precaution, but obviously one that was well taken. The British government so far hasn't responded to our request for information about whether any British people are thought to be amongst the hostages. They obviously will be trying to find out, as other governments will be as well. The Foreign Commonwealth Office advice about travel to Mali was against all travel to a number of provinces and all but essential travel to the rest of Mali. It's a very unstable country. Just bearing in mind what we've been discussing, what group this might be. It's obviously very early to say, and you can't say any group has claimed responsibility at the moment. But I think it's worth pointing out it's very similar to an attack in the town of Sevare in August earlier this year, where a number of people were killed, 13 people killed, a number of them UN workers. Very similar incident where a number of gunmen walked into a hotel, the Byblos Hotel in Sevare, which is to the east of Bamako, a few hundred miles, sort of halfway to the north, which is the most unstable part of Mali. And they took a number of people hostage, and as I say, a number of people died. Now that was the work of what's blamed on Al-Qaeda-related, more homegrown groups, which I think points again to what we've been hearing, which is more likely to be a homegrown Al-Qaeda group, of which there are any number in Mali. Because there is not an Islamic State presence really in the country. It doesn't rule out one group wanting to act in solidarity with Islamic State, but I think a most likely explanation is this is the work of a Mali-based group, of which there are many, and of which we've heard of any number of incidents in recent months and years.
The AFP news agency just reporting that the security forces evacuated, as we were saying, around a dozen hostages, including 2 women. And a journalist there said that they saw 3 freed hostages, 2 women, who told him that they'd seen the body of a fair-skinned man lying on the floor of the hotel. This we can't confirm at the moment, but that's being reported by a journalist who spoke to one of the freed hostages in Mali. Olivier, we know that in terms of those caught up in this so far nationality-wise, France says some of their Air France crew are in the hotel. China have said that they have at least 7 Chinese tourists are among the hostages. And we know that others are also caught up in this, possibly Americans. They've been warned to stay away. Don't know if any Britons are involved. Turkey says that they have some of their workers from Turkish Airlines also caught up. The point is this will make international headlines because it is an international hotel. We were hearing from the risk analyst there, it's the best hotel in Bamako, and it's one where not just foreign workers go, but diplomats, Malay and local people as well. This will affect many people in many countries.
Very much so, and you're putting your finger on exactly the goal of those terrorists was to put Mali front and center, and I think that for all the chaos that has been going on in the country for the past 3 years, all those different jihadist groups must feel that they don't get the exposure that they should, and that the country is in shambles, and the only way that they can get what they want, which is publicity and people coming to know about them, is by attacking a soft target where foreigners are. And you raised a good point. I mean, the fact that this hotel was also not just getting foreign tourists, but also diplomats, and being seen as a main focal point of the foreign community, made it a target much more than others.